Tonight on The Buzz, we talk with producers about the current challenges they face in our industry today. We start with Aaron Semmel, a television and feature film producer with more than 20 years of experience. Tonight he shares his thoughts on what it takes to be a successful producer. Next, Yvonne Russo is an award-winning producer, director, and writer of film, television, and digital media. Tonight, she discusses diversity, underrepresented audiences, and discovering untold stories. Next, Kelley is a senior producer at Explorer, National Geographic's flagship, and a twice Emmy-nominated director and correspondent. Tonight, he provides a global perspective on what the media industry looks like for producers. Next, Tom Jennings is an Emmy and Peabody award-winning documentary filmmaker and journalist. Tonight, he gives us an inside look at the current state of executive producing in today's media landscape. All this, plus the latest from James DeRuvo's journal. The Buzz starts now.
Since the dawn of digital filmmaking.
Authoritative.
One show serves a worldwide network of media professionals.
Current.
Uniting industry experts.
Production.
Filmmakers.
Post-production.
And content creators around the planet.
Distribution.
From the media capital of the world in Los Angeles, California, the Digital Production Buzz goes live now.
Welcome to the Digital Production Buzz, the world's longest-running podcast for the creative content industry, covering media production, post-production, and marketing around the world. Hi, my name is Larry Jordan. This month, we're looking at our industry through a variety of lenses. Last week, we talked with post-production companies. This week, we're chatting with producers. Next week, we look at cameras, and the week after, we examine technology itself, all with the goal of getting a better sense of the state of our industry. There's a lot happening, and I can't wait to share it with you. By the way, if you enjoy The Buzz, please give us a positive rating and review in the iTunes store. We appreciate your support to help us grow our audience. And now it's time for James DeRuvo's Journal. Hello, James.
Happy Thursday, Larry.
And a wonderful Thursday to you. What's the news this week?
We just yesterday had a DJI event where they announced the DJI Osmo Action camera. This is basically a GoPro killer that will shoot 4K 60 with HDR mode and slow motion in HD at up to 240 frames per second. It also has what they're calling rock steady image stabilization that's very similar to GoPro's Hypersmooth. But the real feature that's got everybody talking is this 1.4-inch front-facing touchscreen LCD, which lets all those action camera geeks frame those action selfie shots properly. And that all by itself makes this a very exciting new camera from DJI.
Well, I can already guess, but what's your opinion?
While the new DJI Osmo Action is by no means an innovative design, it is a well-built camera packed with features, some of which action camera geeks have wanted for years. I mean, I can't believe it's taken this long to put a selfie screen on the very front, because every action camera video I've ever seen, half the footage is of the person doing whatever sport they're doing. It's as if DJI took a page from Apple's playbook and stood on the shoulders of giants and refined the state-of-the-art into something everyone can use. But what's really interesting for me is the price. The price is $349, about $50 cheaper to the GoPro Hero 7 when it's not on sale. It's almost as if DJI is ignoring GoPro altogether and just going up against the cheaper brands.
All right, that's DJI. What's our second story?
Adobe is warning Creative Cloud users of legal action should they use older versions of Premiere and other Creative Cloud apps. Users are getting emails advising they are no longer licensed to use older versions of Creative Cloud apps, including Adobe Premiere Pro, Photoshop, Media Director, Animate, and even Lightroom Classic. So users should update to the spring update right away. Continuing to use anything but the most recent version may open up users to legal action from third parties. And the third parties part of this warning may refer to Adobe's ongoing legal dispute with Dolby over how many Creative Cloud users are using their software on a monthly basis. Adobe isn't telling, and Adobe wants their fair share of royalties according to the original agreement made before Creative Cloud was even launched.
Now, I want to mention this is a Creative Cloud issue. If you're running Creative Suite, which is CS6, you're not affected.
That would be true.
I can understand Adobe's position, but this sure puts users in a tough place.
It does. It underscores the precarious nature of software licensing. When you buy software, or in this case, subscribe to it, you don't really own it. You're paying for permission to use it, and that permission can be revoked at any time. In this case, like you said, Adobe is telling users they can't use older versions of Creative Cloud product, or they could be sued, not by Adobe, but by Dolby or any other third party that they are having a legal dispute with. So while Adobe customers are caught in the middle, Adobe is coming off as being heavy-handed in this, even though they're just advising to protect their client base. And it's a PR disaster.
All right, that's Adobe. What's our third story?
Well, Nikon is listening to users and opening up the Wi-Fi standard for their DSLR cameras. Through an upcoming firmware update, users of the Nikon D850, D500, D7500, and D5600 will now be able to use any Wi-Fi standard they choose, bypassing Nikon's proprietary hybrid SnapBridge protocol. Unfortunately, Nikon D5 users aren't included in this update at the moment.
Well, what's the importance of this?
Users have been complaining about the proprietary SnapBridge protocol. It's very limited. It's got a limited distance and range, and they just don't like it. With the Z series camera, Nikon has offered users the choice of either an open Wi-Fi connection or connecting through SnapBridge. And so they're just lining all the other cameras up with that open protocol. And it's really good news because now users are free to use whatever they want.
Well, we've talked about DJI and Adobe and Nikon. What other stories are you following this week?
Other stories we're following include Intel may have another security breach issue affecting their CPUs. A filmmaker adds a DIY flip-up touchscreen to his Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. And are Macs really slowing down with new versions of Mac OS? That's what we're looking at.
And where can we go on the web for industry news and reviews?
All these stories and more can be found at doddleNEWS.com or on Twitter at @doddleNEWS.
And James DeRuvo is the editor-in-chief of Doddle News and joins us every week. We'll see you next Thursday.
Have a good weekend.
I want to introduce you to a new website, Thalo.com. Thalo is an artist community and networking site for creative people to connect, be inspired, and showcase their creativity. Thalo.com features content from around the world with a global perspective on all things creative. Thalo is the place for creative folks to learn, collaborate, market, and sell their works. Thalo is a part of Thalo Arts, a worldwide community of artists, filmmakers, and storytellers. From photography to filmmaking, performing arts to fine arts, and everything in between, Thalo is filled with the resources you need to succeed. Visit Thalo.com and discover how their community can help you connect, learn, and succeed. That's Thalo.com. Aaron Semmel is a television and feature film producer with more than 20 years of experience in producing all forms of TV, from unscripted reality shows to scripted episodic to long-form miniseries. Hello, Aaron. Welcome back.
Hello, Larry. How are you?
I'm talking to you. It's always fun to have you back. Tonight, we're looking at the current state of producing in media. And before we step back to look at the industry, how would you describe the projects that you enjoy producing?
Well, I always say I'm a storyteller at heart. So what I always look for is a good story. That's always my starting point. So it always comes down to is this story relevant, and is there an audience that is out there looking for this story? So at the core of it all, I guess I look for great characters and engaging plot points and things like that. And I feel like if you have those, everything else kind of falls into place.
But it sounds like that's leaning more towards scripted stories than unscripted reality. Is that true?
No, story is just as important in your unscripted as it is in scripted. In fact, it leads to a whole department that doesn't even exist in the scripted realm. In scripted, I always say, where the glass is sitting on the table 6 months before you even start rolling cameras.
Yeah.
So you've got your story figured out before you start. You've already talked to your editor and you've already worked with your director. They've got ideas of how they're shooting things and angling things to get what they need. In unscripted, your story is just as important, and you go out with a vague idea, almost an outline of what you want to do, and you shoot a bunch of footage. And then you come back, and there's a whole department that exists in unscripted called the story producing department. And these are primarily editor-based producers, people who understand story and understand the editing process. And what they do is they string together story points out of all this footage, and they help shape your story. But once again, you notice how many times I said story in that sentence. That's how important it is. You're not going to be involved in a reality TV show if there's no story. When you watch the Olympics, which is, let's say it's a track and field event, and the guy's running the 100-meter dash, that's over in 30 seconds. So how do they make that important to us? Most of the time, they show the background story of the athlete, where they'll give you a video package that explains where this person came from or who they are, so that now you're more invested. Now you have the story that makes the 30 seconds that much more impactful.
All righty. Let's take a step back and look at producing in general rather than producing your projects. As you look at the industry, clearly we're in a time of intense change at multiple levels. But from your perspective as a producer, how do you see what's happening in the industry?
I feel like we're at an odd time in the industry. It's an odd time, but a good time. I always say in chaos, there's opportunity, and we're definitely in the chaotic part of the industry. One big thing that I see happening on the producerial side is what I like to call the end of the 30-second spot. We're starting to see advertisers and marketing change in the way they have to deal with what they do, because the 30-second spot television ad is changing. It's not as effective. It's not working as well. So they're trying to come up with new ways to, integrate brands and have advertising and marketing happen. And it leads to, various different opportunities on the producerial side because, as much as I just preached about being a storyteller, we are in show business, and there's a business side of it. And as a producer, that's a lot of time your job. And the way these advertisers and marketers are working nowadays and what they're looking for, there's a lot of opportunity for new business models for producers to have a chance to do things financially that they wouldn't have been able to do before. Because, again, you're now getting integrated with kind of new, I guess what I would call experimental marketing funds, where the brands are trying to figure out ways to integrate their product.
But thinking about that further, funding has always been a challenge for the independent filmmaker. It sounds like funding is even more challenging because the traditional approaches don't work. Is that true?
Yeah, it's funny because when you say the traditional approaches, like what is a traditional approach? In the old sense, you would think, I have a movie and I'm just going to sell it to a studio and they're going to make my movie. Only that traditional sense is very skewed these days. So it does exist, but it's not like the old days where you could be standing outside the studio and get discovered, so to say. These studio deals now are like reserved for the upper echelon and the top tier of Hollywood because they're only making these giant tentpole movies. So as a writer or somebody, the traditional model of, I'm going to go to Hollywood and a studio is going to make my movie, in the independent sense, it's very difficult. That doesn't exist anymore. It's very hard. But it does exist in the sense that studios are still making movies, that model still exists. But what is happening is a rise in independent producing for vehicles like Netflix and Amazon Prime, which are streaming. So now there was a bit of a lull when the studios stopped making independent movies and were focusing on tentpoles. Independent producers started having a really hard time creating business models so that they could fund their production. But as we now have evolved and moved into the streaming realm, it's opened up a whole new business model. Like I said, out of chaos comes opportunity, which led to a whole new genre of independent filmmaking for streaming purposes, for the audience that is at home, the audience that would like to sit down and watch a well-crafted, character-driven drama. That audience doesn't necessarily go to the movie theaters anymore, but they are at home watching it, and they do want that content. So it's now created this market for it, and now independent producers are finding new ways to raise funding through that vehicle, which is very interesting.
It is not only very interesting, but it's a different environment. We're not looking at films on the large screen anymore. We're looking at films on the small screen. Does that change the way that you either shoot or produce a film?
Me personally, again, it goes back to story, where it's like the artist in me would like to say, I will never compromise my artistic integrity. But at the same time, yeah, you think about these things. I mean, look at Jeffrey Katzenberg right now launching an entire company. I believe it's called Quibi, which is creating content for the small screen. And when I say small screen, I mean tablets and iPhones.
Yep.
Content that is created specifically for short form, 2 to 5 minutes. You're going to watch it quick. You're going to have your headphones in. You're on the bus. So do they want to see big, massive Game of Thrones, dragging, burning cities? Oh, sorry, spoiler alert. But do they want to see these things? No, they want to see different type of content. So you do that. Another interesting thing on that note, and I talk about it a lot with people, is how, like, in our business a lot, we make, like, these sizzle reels to go sell our concept. So as a producer, I'll have an idea for a TV show. Let's go make a TV show about Larry interviewing people. So I have this concept. And then I'm going to make a sizzle reel, and I'm going to make a video, and the video is going to show how that show would look and how it would work and the types of people who Larry would interview on his show. So when I make this sizzle reel, I have been telling more and more people to look at YouTube. I've been finding myself saying this. When you make a sizzle reel, look at YouTube. Watch how they make content, short-form content, how kids, I call them kids, but, people, are making content on YouTube that is designed to be short, engaging, visual. Like, there's a big thing in infographics right now where it's like, put your words on the screen, because what's happening on the small screen, people aren't listening. I've read statistics that say most people who watch an Instagram video aren't listening to it. They're just watching it. They have no value. So if you have something important to say, put words on the screen and say, because they're not listening to it. So sometimes it does affect how you create your content. But for the most part, like I said, story is very important. If I'm going to make a story about millennials and the way they communicate, then yes, I'll create a very thematic aspect to the show that is in some ways visually representative of texting or Snapchatting or whatever these kids do these days. You know what I'm saying, Larry?
Yep. It sounds like it's producing for the ADD generation.
Well, I'll
Aaron?
tell you what, I think every generation before has said that about the content they make for the next generation. So,
Aaron, for people that want to hire you for their next gig or give an idea to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I always say you could just email me at my email direct. In the producerial game, you get right to the source. So email me direct. My email is very easy. It's just my name at gmail.com. Aaron Semmel at gmail.com.
Aaron
So feel
Cemil.
free. Anyone can email me. I'm happy to talk to you.
And Aaron, it is always fun to talk to you. Aaron Semmel is executive producer and CEO of BoomBoomBooya and a producer in his own right of many shows. Aaron, thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Larry. I'm sorry for the sound quality, too. Like a regular Hollywood producer, I'm out and about trying to run around and make a deal.
No problem. Talk to you later. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yvonne Russo is an award-winning producer, director, and writer for film, television, and digital. She's currently producing with Warner Brothers and Bad Robot on a television series which is in development and executive producing with Handmade Films, a comedy series for television. Hello, Yvonne. Welcome back.
Hi there. Thank you.
Yvonne, tonight we're looking at the current state of producing. And before we look at the industry, how would you describe the projects that you enjoy producing?
Well, the projects that I enjoy producing are projects that have a meaningful and exciting social value to them. I really find myself gravitating towards somewhat historical pieces that reframe the narrative from an indigenous perspective. And then the other is, pure comedy.
What is it about history that appeals to you?
I just feel that the American epic hasn't been told. We live in a false reality sometimes. I think that there is just a number of stories that need to be told from all different perspectives, especially groups of people that have not had the opportunity to tell their stories. When you look at history, everything was based on Western civilization and the westward expansion, leaving a number of indigenous voices out, a number of African American voices out, a number of all these other subgroups, within our nation that have a portal of stories to tell. And I think that now we're at a time where we are ready to open up and hear the truth of different stories from all different races and backgrounds. I have a real passion for history because I think all the gems are there.
Let's shift gears from the programs you're working on to your role as a producer. Mm-hmm. As you look at producing in today's environment, what do you see happening in the industry?
From my perspective as an independent producer, I have been developing projects over the course of the last 4 years, actually. And I finally feel that we're at a place in entertainment in general. There's lots of different opportunities because of all the various streaming platforms. We have an opportunity to actually get our projects produced much more than, say, the way it was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, and that's due to all of the different streaming services that are out there. And in the past, it was always extremely difficult because you had to have an agent and you had to have connections, within the industry to come in and pitch your stories. And now I think that the industry is opening up and wanting to hear from voices that they haven't heard, underrepresented voices, and talent that isn't necessarily with agents or represented by agents. So I think that the industry is just much more open to a variety of voices in general. So as a producer and from somebody, I'm of an indigenous background, it provides more opportunities for myself, at least in terms of pitching our story. So it's a good time.
Well, I'm hearing that distribution has exploded, but is getting funding any easier today than it was a while back?
Not in my perspective. Right now, I've been working mostly in development for television, so that's very different than producing features. It still is about attaching a named talent, even though there's some companies or others will argue that that's not the case. But when we are packaging our own movies, it's usually we can't go in without having a director attached or without having at least a celebrity that could be driving the material, and then everything else is cast around that. I don't know exactly how numbers are quantified and such, but I think, with international sales agents, apparently celebrities still drive the foreign territory. So in that sense, funding for films is still traditional in that realm. And then there's other sources of ways to fund films as well, and that's through even social impact campaigns. And there's foundations and nonprofit organizations that are starting to fund and put seed money towards the development of feature films. These are smaller pockets of money, but it's enough for a producer to eventually cultivate the story, cultivate the project, get it to that next stage of development, possibly attaching a director, and then eventually able to present it to a studio or network or other production company. Either way, I will say it is a challenge. It's all about perseverance. You really have to persevere, and you have to believe in a project so much that whatever it takes, you're going to get the project funded and completed. So you just have to stay dedicated.
You've been producing during the rise of the Me Too movement. Have you seen any change there?
Well, I mean, women are definitely coming together in ways that we have not in the past. We sort of have our own code of conduct between ourselves, so that way we know that if someone's crossing a line, that we are all have decided to stand up, and take responsibility for that. I think that it's helped us, so that way we're stronger together and united, which is nice. And I think that because of the Me Too movement, women are really being more vocal in terms of how they feel about things and don't feel like their voices are suppressed or that they're afraid anymore. So it's a good time.
Your work is all about finding the right story, especially from groups that haven't been able to tell their stories before, but media is also about technology. Are there any technologies that you're watching, and what makes them interesting to you?
I'm really interested in more of the mobile technology and how that's going to evolve and how content is eventually going to shape for that sort of smaller snack-sized screen. I just think that, to me, as we progress into the future, more and more people are just watching content on their phones, and their phones are getting larger, and people are just consuming that way mobily, and so that interests me the most.
You've mentioned that funding remains an ongoing challenge requiring perseverance.
Yep.
If we exclude funding, what are the biggest challenges you have in producing?
If we exclude funding, well, then it means I have to get another job. What would I be? What would I do? I don't know.
Let me ask my question differently. If funding was assured, what would be your biggest challenge in producing? Is it finding the talent? Is it finding the story? Is it schedules or need to be longer? What's the challenge if funding is assured?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because even when you do have funding, that is the next step. That next step is finding that director that's on your wish list. And will that director accept the project? Is it the right director? Is it somebody that you feel, is a good collaborator with the rest of your producing team? The actors that we approach, are they available? What's their window? Can we afford them? Yes. I mean, I think scheduling is actually a really big challenge.
As you look to the future, What gets you the most excited?
Inclusion. What gets me excited is learning from all the different voices that are out there, all the different subcultures, voices from parts of the world that we haven't heard. I love learning through story. So for me, I just want to hear more stories from people that we haven't heard from before. So that makes me the most excited.
Yvonne, for people that want to keep track of the projects you're creating, where can they go on the web?
You can go visit my website at YvonneRusso.com.
That's all one word, Y-V-O-N-N-E, Yvonne Russo, R-U-S-S-O, YvonneRusso.com. And she is an award-winning producer, director, and writer. And Yvonne, it is always fun to talk with you. Thank you for sharing your time.
Thank you so much, Larry. Have a great day.
Tom Jennings is an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning documentary filmmaker and journalist. He has written, produced, and directed more than 400 hours of programming for such networks as CBS, Discovery, National Geographic, and many more. Hello, Tom. Welcome back.
Hi, Larry. Thanks for having me.
Tom, tonight we're looking at the current state of producing. And before we look at the industry, how would you describe the projects that you enjoy producing?
I came out of a print journalism background, so I'm kind of a generalist. I love finding great stories, and I think the stories that I like to tell best are ones where people think they know the story, but actually there's a lot more there. I mean, a really good example from about 10 years ago, something that I had tried to produce forever, was the manhunt for John Wilkes Booth, the person that killed Abraham Lincoln. And most people know the story that Booth shot Lincoln in Ford's Theater, and sometime thereafter he was killed. But there's these 12 days that he was on the run. And I tried to sell that show for years. But I had a passion for it because when I found out about the story, it was this amazing slice of American history that most people don't know anything about. All the characters that Booth and his accomplice came across, how they were hidden, how they tried to cross the Potomac River. It was this amazing, slice of history that I didn't know, and I thought I knew history pretty well, and I just kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, and finally I did it, and I sold it to the History Channel, and then they said, "Gee, you're a genius. This is a great story." So it's that kind of thing where you think you know it, but there's so many more layers there, and it makes it fun, and it's a great yarn. So that's the kind of stuff I like to do.
Let's take a step back and up. From your perspective as a producer, Aaron Semmel just described our industry as being in a state of chaos. What's your perspective?
I think I'd agree with Aaron Semmel about being in a state of chaos. It's in a state of chaos. He is correct in that, it's the delivery systems that are putting us in a state of chaos, and that's kind of always been the case. I mean, think back, one of my favorite eras is the newsreel era, which was killed by television. You don't have newsreels in movie theaters anymore. But now it just seems the splintering of the networks into, the 500-channel universe, and then laying in all of the streaming services, SVOD. Everybody's got a streaming service now, and it's just become less and less. I think what's happening is, we're losing that kind of national campfire. Say, 30 or 40 years ago, people would sit around and watch MASH or All in the Family or something, and most of your friends would know about what had happened the previous night on television. Now that doesn't exist anymore. It gives us lots of choices, and there's lots of places for producers to go to sell those choices. But what's happening more and more is with the splintering becomes the driving down of budgets, the need for a voluminous amount of material, of content to put out there. And some of it's very, very good, and then some of it is you can just tell that it's been thrown together. trying to do good work in this universe, it makes it. For me, I don't know about Aaron Semmel, but I feel like a dervish sometimes. It's like I'm spinning. What if we do how about this story? How about that? What genre is selling over here? So, yeah, he's right. It's like the Wild West, but the Wild West seems a bit tame compared to what we're going through right now.
Your focus is documentaries, clearly, but as you look at it, what either documentary subjects or show trends seem hot right now?
Yeah, and to be fair, we do mostly documentary television versus what people might consider a documentary feature, which would be more of a movie theater like an Errol Morris or Michael Moore. But we do nonfiction television, documentary television. And I'll tell you the one thing, I can answer this very specifically for you. They want something no one has ever seen, no one has ever heard before. We're kind of burning out, and I have a background in investigative reporting, and it's like sometimes, it may have been seen once before, but there's so much more to this story. But if you walk into a network executive's office or send them a note, an email or something like that and say, I just found this, and no one's ever heard of it, and it's going to change the way we think about this major moment, either currently in our zeitgeist or in history, they'll pay attention. They need something. You almost have to, Larry, we used to say, I think we've talked about this before, we have to think like network executives if we want to sell our shows to the networks. I'm taking that a step further now, and I'm saying we have to think like a marketing executive. Mm-hmm. We want to do good work, but they need to cut through the noises. They use that term. We have to cut through the noise. We have to cut through the noise. And what that means is they need something that's going to grab a viewer right away and then hold them because it's good.
One of the thoughts that Aaron and Yvonne both mentioned, and it's tied into the whole question of technology, is one of the challenges we have now is that people are watching less, perhaps, on the large screen and more on the small screen, like tablets and cell phones. Does that change how you produce your shows?
I don't know if it changes it in the big picture, how literally the big picture. What it would change, one of my favorite movies from days gone by is Lawrence of Arabia, for example. There's that very famous shot of Lawrence coming over the horizon. David Lean must have held on the thing for 2 minutes, if you recall the shot I'm talking about, where he's riding out of the desert slowly towards the camera. And on a big screen, this is breathtaking art. But if you're looking at it on your phone, on the subway, it's just not going to read. Mm-hmm. There's no, and the reason I mention it is, for me as a producer, or if I'm directing, something, there's no point in us going to all that trouble if someone's going to watch that on their phone, because it's just not going to be impactful. I need to keep, the eyeballs connected to whatever device they're on. So things need to be a little bit closer in. The story has to be moving quickly. I think it might have been Aaron that was saying, when he does sizzle reels now, he puts, words on screen sometimes, thinking like, what you would see on Facebook, when these little videos come up, where you have the option. Actually, I thought that was a pretty good idea for a sizzle reel. I made a note of that one. But you have to remember that people are being, they're being pulled in dozens of different directions all day long, and you want them to park on what you're doing. And so in terms of the content delivery on a small device, I think it is important to remember that. However, I wouldn't keep it in the forefront. If I had some grand artistic shot that I thought was going to be so beautiful, but it was going to burn 3 days budget for 2 minutes of film, I wouldn't do it anymore.
As you look to the future, what do you think are both our biggest challenges, and what gets you the most excited?
Well, it's exciting in that there are a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of places to take your idea. I have a lot of ideas that I'm very passionate about, but just because I'm passionate about them doesn't mean that a network will be, or my network executive might be very passionate about it, but their marketing team will say that just doesn't fit with what we're doing. They're all going after branding, but the opportunities are there to do a lot of different things. Now, which is great. Getting funding to do that, being able to follow through, taking your idea all the way to a screen, whatever size, that can be tricky. The exciting thing is that it's the Wild West, but we're all you get to choose the horse that you want to ride on. Conversely, you do have to remember that you're trying to tailor to various audiences of various ages, all up in different networks want to appeal to different age groups, and you want to keep people entertained. And, in documentary, you want to keep them informed. So you want to tell a story where they're going to draw something out of it, but you need to keep them entertained at the same time. And so that has always been the same. That's existed from the beginning. And it's just convincing a viewer that what you're about to watch is not going to be boring. It's going to be something visually that's going to appeal to you. And if you learn something along the way, well, all the better.
And for people who want to learn what they haven't heard or learned before, where can they go on the web?
About me?
Yep, you got it.
We have a company website. It's 1895films.
That's the numbers 1895films.com. And Tom Jennings is executive producer for 1895 Films. And Tom, thanks for joining us today.
Very, so good to talk to you. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Here's another website I want to introduce you to, doddleNEWS.com. DoddleNEWS gives you a portal into the broadcast, video, and film industries. It's a leading online resource presenting news, reviews, and products for the film and video industry. DoddleNEWS also offers a resource guide and crew management platform specifically designed for production. These digital call sheets, along with their app, directory, and premium listings, provide in-depth organizational tools for busy production professionals. DoddleNEWS is a part of the Thalo Arts community, a worldwide community of artists, filmmakers, and storytellers. From photography to filmmaking, performing arts to fine arts, and everything in between, Thalo is filled with resources you need to succeed. Whether you want the latest industry news, need to network with other creative professionals, or require state-of-the-art online tools to manage your next project, there's only one place to go, doddleNEWS.com. J.J. Kelley is a twice Emmy-nominated director and correspondent. He's also a senior producer at Explorer, which is National Geographic's flagship documentary series, whose work has taken him to all 7 continents, and he's currently hosting an adventure series for the Travel Channel. J.J., welcome back.
Hey, Larry. Great to talk to you again.
I understand we're catching you in mid-airport, so clearly the traveling does not stop in the middle of the week.
Yeah, it's been a little bit crazy from the start of the year. I found myself up in the Bering Sea in Alaska. I just got back from Tokyo and Seoul, and I've been to many places in between. And right now I'm watching the sunset over the beautiful Kansas landscape.
Well, I would begin to say that I feel sorry for you, but actually it sounds like a really great life from my distance as opposed to having to live it.
I like it. I'm having fun with it.
Tonight we're looking at the current state of producing media, but before we look at sort of the industry, how would you describe the projects that you enjoy producing?
Yeah, well, thank you, Larry. I work in documentary television for the most part, and even kind of dialing in to that genre a little bit more, I focus on exploration, adventure, kind of off the beaten path locations, spots like Antarctica, the Congo, kind of the places that nobody else really wanted to go to. Those are the places that I love.
Okay. So let's take a step back and view the industry more as an industry and a business rather than the specific shows that you've done. From your perspective as a producer, what do you see happening in the industry? And to give you some background, we talked with Yvonne Russo and Aaron Semmel and Jennings, and they all describe it as an industry which is enmeshed in chaos. What would you think?
Enmeshed in chaos. I think that that's not a completely horrible description. I think that that's actually pretty spot on. It's changing a lot. I remember when I was a kid and I'd turn on the television, and if the President of the United States was talking, you'd flip through your 4 or 5 channels, and the President was on every channel. You got the same thing. And then we saw this boom with cable television networks and then streaming services where there were all these different companies, and anybody who had an idea could come up with their own network and their own content. And you had all these kind of tailor-made productions that were available on all these different platforms. And now we still have a lot of those platforms, but they're being consolidated. You have Netflix, this juggernaut, who is just eclipsed by Disney as the largest media company in the world. So you're getting back to this space where you just have a handful of companies running everything. So it is a bit chaotic, and within that battle, we're still seeing traditional broadcast and cable getting a lot of the advertising dollars, but at the same time, everybody's talking about digital and what it means to be in digital space, and everybody wants some of that. So kind of how I've aligned myself in this nebulous landscape is to diversify myself as any good portfolio to make branded content at the same time that I'm working on a traditional cable series. And then kind of I look at those as my stocks, the more risky investments. And then kind of my bond, the safer investment, is educational videos, because education doesn't change on the whims of an executive who decides they want to can a show and go a different direction. Generally, those are built a little bit further out, and they pay just as much a lot of the times as your broadcast programs, and they're stable. So I think that, yes, the landscape is chaotic, and I think one of the keys is just diversifying and knowing how to make the traditional broadcast, but also not just dabbling, but finding success in digital content, and then kind of having your bread and butter that no matter what happens, you can still depend on those as a source of income.
We're seeing that people are consuming media in ways that are different than years past. It used to be we'd watch on television or go to the theater and watch on the big screen, but now the small screen, tablets and cell phones, have a dominant presence in a lot of the industry. Does that change the type of programs you create?
Yeah, I think it changes the type of programs that you create. I was listening to the show, and I agree that content is king. If you still have a good idea, it's going to find viewers. But the delivery platform changes, the length changes, and even what you put on the screen needs to change depending on the device that it's being viewed. Right now I'm working on a series with a major U.S. airline where we're going out into the world and we're looking at a sport and the kind of changing face of that sport. So it's branded content, and this branded content is going to be viewed and available on Instagram, on Facebook. So it's original content, just like I would make for National Geographic or a documentary network, but it's going out through a new medium, and that is social media. So it is changing quite a bit.
Aaron made a comment that a lot of videos people are watching, but they're not listening to them. It's the social media video where you see video with text, and the audio is irrelevant. Is this a threat, or is this a splinter, or what's your thought?
No, I think that's a great observation. I think that it's spot on. I mentioned this series that I'm doing for it, Instagram and Facebook, and we used to have to deliver this thing called a dot cap file, a dot closed caption file that you'd put for viewers that were hard of hearing, and they were able to toggle. We've all seen this before. You're able to toggle between no closed captioning and closed captioning. Mm-hmm. But now it's a new format where basically if the viewer does not have the audio on, they're going to automatically see text on screen. So I think that is the new approach moving forward. I live in New York City, and I took the subway a fair amount this week, and I would always kind of peer over at people next to videos on YouTube. They're watching videos on Instagram and Facebook, but they have text on screen, and this is text that's just offered to them, and I'm not exactly sure how much of it they're reading, but that is a delivery method. They may or may not have headphones in, but you definitely need to be able to communicate not only with traditional text on screen that you would add as a chyron in the video, but also as this kind of layer that's put into the video that can be toggled on and off.
A lot of what you focus on is content because you create documentaries, but is there technology that you're paying attention to, or is new emerging technology that's caught your eye?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of value in coming up with a story and a program that has a traditional outlet, but hyping that outlet and promoting it through free platforms like social media. I think you can do a lot with Instagram Live and Facebook Live and Instagram video to really point to your video as it comes out. I remember when I started in TV just 12 years ago, and when we went out on a shoot and we captured photos and Facebook was coming up, we signed documents and we would get yelled at. People would get fired if you posted any photos from that shoot before the show would be broadcast. You couldn't put any of it out. Any content that you captured couldn't go out on social media until that episode aired. And then you'd have to wait the next week until the next episode aired, and then you could talk about content from that shoot as well. Now it's the complete opposite. As you're out in the field, you're live streaming what you're capturing there. You're creating an impression of this story idea. You're creating content as you go along. So you're able to sell ad sales that way, but then when the film comes out, you're getting money that way as well. And you've built up this hype along the way where people now know about your show and they're more likely to watch.
As you look to the future, what has you the most excited and what has you the most concerned?
I am excited because I do think that we live in this amazing era of video production. It's changing so much that I think that we couldn't have foreseen where we are today. Remember Blockbuster Video? Remember how many stores there were of Blockbuster Video? Mm-hmm. They're gone. They're gone. And I don't think that, 15 years ago, anybody would have thought that a company like Blockbuster would be gone. So it can be incredibly unstable. Just in the car that I'm riding in now, we were talking about Kodak and how that company went from a monster company to really, this obscure niche company. And that happened in just a very short period of time. So that is a little bit terrifying, but that's also the same thing that brings me a lot of excitement. Because with these changes, yes, some of the streams of delivery methods have dried up, but in their wake have been these amazing ways to tell stories in unique methods, going to interesting locations, and not being reliant on just a handful of networks that we used to, depend on. So I think it's very exciting because, like one of your callers said before, if you can come up with a new idea, something that's fresh, audiences and networks are going to want that. So what's really exciting is if you have a new idea and a new delivery method and you've kind of got your fingertips on the pulse of what's hot, then you're going to succeed. And if it's new and fresh and goes big, you can win big.
Exciting stuff. JJ, for people who want to keep track of where you are in the world, where can they go on the web?
Oh, thank you, Larry. I always have fun talking to you. I'm at jjkelley.com, and from there you can find me on Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff.
That's JJKELLEY, jjkelley.com, and JJ Kelley is the senior producer for National Geographic. And JJ, thanks for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Larry.
Bye-bye. I was just thinking. I spent yesterday getting trained and certified in the Dante audio protocol. This is a well-established protocol invented by Audinate for linking audio devices and sending audio over Ethernet rather than traditional audio cables. We call this AOIP, audio over IP, and Audinate is an industry leader in this area. The class got me thinking about how technology expands our production horizons. For example, and those of you doing live sound at concerts and events already know this, we can connect mics and other audio sources directly to Ethernet using converters, not just mixers, microphones. Then we can send that audio signal anywhere within the same network subnet. For example, using the routing built into Dante, we can send the same mic to the stage mixer, front of house mixer, live stream or broadcast mixer, all using Ethernet. Using a gigabit Ethernet switch, Dante supports sending up to 512 different audio sources to up to 512 different audio destinations, all using Ethernet. The flexibility of the system is truly impressive. No longer do we need to locate audio control rooms next to a studio, nor, for that matter, do we need to dedicate one control room per studio. The new age of digital audio networks and protocols like Dante allow us to configure control rooms based upon the work they need to do, rather than the location they need to be in. It was a fascinating day of learning for me. I've used Dante as part of our NAB coverage for the last 2 years on the Buzz, but at that time the system was set up by others. Now I better understand how to use it myself. The training room yesterday was filled with 30 audio professionals, almost all of whom were mixing or recording audio on a daily basis for corporate events, churches, live streams, and broadcast. It was fun to spend the day learning from them as well. I've spent time on the Buzz raising concerns about technology, but yesterday was a day to celebrate how technology can enable us to do things we couldn't do before without costing anyone their job. Just something I'm thinking about. I want to thank our guests this week, producers Aaron Semmel, Yvonne Russo, J.J. Kelley, and Tom Jennings. And as always, James DeRuvo with doddleNEWS.com. There's a lot of history in our industry, and it's all posted to our website at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Here you'll find thousands of interviews, all online and all available to you today. And remember to sign up for our free weekly show newsletter that comes out every Saturday morning. Talk with us on Twitter at DPBuzz and Facebook at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Transcripts are provided by TakeOne.tv. Our theme music is composed by Nathan Doogie Turner with additional music provided by SmartSound.com. Our producer is Paulina Borowski. My name is Larry Jordan, and thanks for listening to the Digital Production Buzz. The Digital Production Buzz is copyright 2019 by Thalo LLC.